Okay, so are you ready to dive into something kind of spooky today?
Always up for a good spooky story.
Yeah, well, this one, it's not just like, your typical ghost story. This one really kind of gets under your skin.
Intriguing. What makes this one so special?
It's a personal story, right? Like of someone's actual experience, but
Okay.
then it gets all tangled up with like Kazakh folklore and traditions about death and stuff.
Well, blending personal experience with cultural beliefs, that's always a potent mix, especially when the supernatural is involved.
Exactly. And the source material we're looking at is called pasted text. It's basically like this firsthand account. And get this, the narrator hints that their grandmother might have been, wait for it, a witch.
A witch. Okay, now you've got my attention. Folklore and potential witchcraft, this is right up my alley. Where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think the best place to start is with the grandmother herself, right? She's like the central figure in all of this.
It makes sense. What kind of character is she? Good witch? Bad witch? Somewhere in between.
Well, that's the thing. It's not so clear cut. The story paints this picture of her, right, as being both like loving and playful with the narrator, but then also like stern and secretive.
Yeah.
She's got this whole mysterious vibe going on.
Ah, the classic mysterious grandmother trope. Always a winner. What sort of secrets is she hiding?
Well, for starters, she has this forbidden room that no one's allowed to enter.
Ooh, a forbidden room.
Not
Now we're talking. That just screams secrets and hidden knowledge. What do we know about what's in there? Anything specific?
not really. It's more like the fact that it's off limits makes it like extra creepy. It makes you wonder what she's hiding in there and why it's so important to keep it secret.
Absolutely. It plays on that fear of the unknown, what's lurking behind that closed door. It's a classic storytelling technique to build suspense. But tell me more about this grandmother. Aside from the forbidden room, what else gives her that witchy vibe?
Well, there are a few things. The story mentions that she's known as a seer in her community, which is called an all.
A seer. Interesting. So she's got a reputation for having some kind of special abilities or insights.
Yeah, and that's a big deal in Kazakh culture. Like
Hmm.
people really respect those who are believed to have those kinds of like spiritual gifts.
Definitely. It adds a whole layer of cultural significance to the story.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder, what kind of seeing is she doing? Is it benevolent? Or is there a darker side to her power?
Right. Like is she using her abilities for good? Or is there something more sinister going on? Plus, there's this phrase that she keeps repeating. It's like, Balam, Berikel, Kelioi.
Okay, can you translate that for us non-Kazakh speakers? What does that mean?
Yeah, basically means like, my child, come here, come.
Uh,
But the way she keeps saying it, it's almost like a little haunting. It's like a refrain that keeps popping up throughout the story.
A recurring phrase, huh? That's often a sign of something significant. Could it be a clue to her true nature? Or maybe some kind of incantation?
Ooh, an incantation. That's a good point. It definitely adds to that whole witchy vibe. Like maybe it's more than just a simple phrase.
Right. It could be a way for her to, like, exert her power or influence. Or maybe it's a way to summon something. Or someone.
That's kind of creepy when you put it like that. And speaking of creepy, things get even weirder when the grandmother gets sick.
Uh-oh. Sick grandmother. That never ends well in these kinds of stories. What happens?
Well, the narrator wants to buy her flowers, right?
Uh,
Like you do when someone's not feeling well. But then the narrator's mother insists that they buy 4 flowers instead of 5.
4 flowers instead of 5. Is that significant? Does that have some sort of meaning in Kazakh culture?
It does. It's like an even number of flowers is traditionally for funerals.
Ah, so it's like a subtle foreshadowing. The mother might have sensed that something was seriously wrong. Like maybe she suspected it was more than just a regular illness.
Yeah, it's like she knew something we didn't, you
Uh,
know? And sure enough, the grandmother dies.
Okay, so the grandmother dies. Not a huge surprise given the whole 4 flowers thing, but I'm guessing this isn't where the story ends.
Oh, it's just getting started. You see, the narrator is totally in denial about the grandmother's death. Like, can't accept it.
Hmm.
But then, things take a seriously creepy turn.
Creepy turn. How so? Does she come back as a ghost? Or is it something even stranger than that?
Well, she does start appearing to the narrator at night. But it's not like the grandmother they remember. It's like her skin is described as being dark blue like the evening sky, and her touch is colder than ice.
Whoa, that's definitely not your average friendly grandmother ghost. That's way more unsettling.
Right. And it's not just the appearance. It's like her whole demeanor is different. It's like she's not really there.
Almost like she's become something else entirely. It makes you question what really happens after death, right? And what forms those who pass on might take.
Exactly. It's like, is this really her spirit? Or is it something else pretending to be her.
And I bet that recurring phrase comes back into play, right? The Balam berikel keleroi.
You bet it does. It's like every time she appears, she says it. And it just makes the whole thing even more, like, spine-chilling, you know?
Chilling, for
Yeah,
sure, especially since it was already kind of creepy before she died. It adds a whole other layer of unease to the situation.
totally. It's like this unsettling connection to her past, even though she's, supposedly gone.
Yeah, it really makes you question what's real and what's not. Is it just the narrator's grief manifesting in a strange way? Or is there something truly supernatural happening?
And then hold on tight, because this is where it gets even more intense. The grandmother invites the narrator into the forbidden room.
The forbidden room. Finally, we get to see what's behind that mysterious door. What happens next? Spill the beans.
So they go to the room, and the narrator notices that the lock is missing.
Missing. As in, it was there before, and now it's gone. That's ominous.
Yeah, it's like someone or something wanted that room accessible. And when they get inside, the grandmother isn't standing. She's crawling on the ground.
Crawling. Okay, now I'm officially creeped out. What's going on in that room?
That's the thing. It's never fully explained. But the story describes all these sensory details, like the smell of earth and dust, and, get this, something metallic.
Metallic. That's a strange detail. What could that smell be coming from? It's definitely not your typical dusty old room smell.
Right. Like, what is that all about? It makes you think, was there some kind of ritualistic practice going on in there? Or is the metallic smell like a clue to the source of the grandmother's power? The story never explicitly says, and it just makes the whole thing even more mysterious.
It's like the story is giving you just enough to pique your curiosity, but not enough to fully satisfy it. It's left to the reader, or in this case, the listener, to fill in the blanks. And that can be just as unsettling, if not more so, than having all the answers laid out.
Exactly. It's your imagination that really takes over and makes it scary. And then, bam, the story just ends. The narrator escapes the room, but we never find out what they saw in there, what happened to the grandmother, or, like, if they truly escaped.
A classic open ending. It's frustrating, sure, but it also keeps you thinking about the story long after it's over. It's like, did they really escape the supernatural forces at play, or is there something more sinister going on?
It really makes you question the whole thing, Like, was
No.
any of it real? Or was it all just in the narrator's head?
Right. Like, was it trauma, grief, or a genuine encounter with something beyond our understanding? It's a question without a definitive answer, and I think that's part of what makes this story so effective. It plays on those primal fears of the unknown and the things that go bump in the night.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, like, the power of belief, right? Like, how much of what we experience is shaped by what we believe about the world, about death, about the afterlife.
Absolutely. It also highlights how cultural traditions and folklore can influence our perception of reality. These stories, they're not just entertainment. They reflect deeper anxieties and beliefs about the world around us.
So, to wrap things up, this deep dive, it's been a wild ride, right? We've got this chilling story that mixes folklore, cultural traditions, and the uncanny. It makes you question the boundaries between reality and, the supernatural.
It's a reminder that even in a world that seems increasingly explainable, there are still corners of darkness and mystery. And those corners can be both terrifying and endlessly fascinating.
And before we go, I'd like to leave you, the listener, with one final thought. This story is set in Kazakhstan, but how does it connect with your own cultural background? Do you have similar stories or beliefs about death, witches, or the afterlife? I encourage you to explore those connections and see where they lead you.
It's always fascinating to see how these universal themes are expressed and interpreted across different cultures. There's a whole world of folklore out there waiting to be discovered. Who knows what other chilling tales are waiting to be unearthed?
Stay curious and keep exploring, but maybe leave the lights on tonight.